Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Wednesday. That means, Dave, we get to come and ask you a million questions. Are you ready today?
I am so excited that we are finally back. So we're together, we're answering questions, helping people get to a more safe and secure retirement.
Dave, what's it like in Tennessee? We have all of this fun that's been happening around your life, but right now, are you settling down a little bit and getting back to normal?
We are now, it is fairly chilly or has been. Today's not so bad. We're in the mid 50s, so much better than where you're at. But it's been a little cold. Things have been shut down because of the winter. A lot of activities here are outdoors, as you know from living in Tennessee, that people like to get out and spend time when the weather's good, going to the various areas that you can go to, from the parks to the walking and hiking trails. So we've been a little slow, but looking forward to the springtime as we get to a point we can all get out a little more.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the spring. As you and I were talking before the show, we were talking about feeding animals in the morning and how bitter cold it is to go out and feed them. And most of the time, my water spigot doesn't work, and I have to go from another place and carry buckets back. And it is very cold. And you've done very similar times when you were growing up.
It's always interesting for me as I go across the country and I talk to people, I tell them I'm from Utah. The number one question or comment people always make is about skiing. Like, oh, you must be a skier. I am not a skier. Two main reasons. One, when I was a teenager, I almost killed myself skiing, and that was bad enough. But number two, when you spend your childhood getting up at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning when it can be negative temperatures outside, trying to feed animals and deal with the water and gather wood so you can burn it inside your home, cold weather is not your friend as you age.
Very, very true. And I find that out every morning, or at least by lunch when things thaw a little bit. So you're right. It's always a little cold here.
Yeah, it's a little tough when you have those animals because they have to be fed and watered, and feeding's usually not such a bad thing. It's really the water system when everything's froze up out there. Many times your faucets are froze. So yeah, I'm not a skier, will never be. My kids may take it up at some point in their lives, but don't look for me on the ski slopes if you're trying to find me.
Yeah, and I love to ski. The problem is it's being cold. I love being warm. I would love to be on a beach, being out there like where you were in Puerto Rico for many years. I love that. That's the kind of temperature. But my wife, she likes the cold. So we've got to kind of balance that out a little bit.
Yeah, I'm really starting to realize why retirees buy a home in a warm climate for the wintertime. I'm getting to that point that as my kids get out of school in Utah, that home's going to get sold and we're going to buy something on a beach somewhere.
There you go. Well, Dave, I want to remind everyone who's watching live to go ahead and let us know where you're watching from. Also, submit your retirement questions. We have so many questions that I have lined out to ask Dave, but I encourage you to ask your questions. Or if you have friends that are around, have them go ahead and submit their questions here. We have Facebook and YouTube that we're taking our questions live with today. And as you submit those questions, we'll go through and see if we can squeeze them in and get Dave to answer those. It's just really fun to do this, and we always bug Dave about it, but we know how passionate he is about retirement. And the best thing about this is going through and helping him to help you. And so, Dave, is that really the case of all of this?
It is. People need guidance, they need help, especially when retirement looks different than it did for our parents, our grandparents. The traditional retirement plan that people are used to is not the story I tell. It's not the story that you should be looking forward to. You don't have the pensions, you don't have situations that we had even just a decade or two ago. We're facing situations where we're living longer. We've got tax rates that are uncertain, a lot of market risks that's uncertain, and it's my job to help you eliminate those various risks.
And that's why you're here. That's why you're here to answer all these questions and help those that are coming on. Because a lot of times they just have questions. We were even talking before the show about reverse mortgages, and there's a lot of people that push them. And we have our opinion, and you have yours as well. And that's the one thing is we want to make sure we help each person in their situation because it's not going to be the same for everyone.
Yeah, that's the problem with a lot of people who do sales is they try to fit their product into everyone's life. When we look especially at retirement products, they want it to fit inside of your life because obviously the more they can get it to fit into your life, the more money they make. And that's not the story I tell at all either. There are a lot of products, and I go through those lists when I do my planning to explain to people, look, these are the tools that we're going to use. We've got a shed full of tools, just like you would have if you got a garden. We've got a shed full of tools. Some of them we're going to use, some we won't. Some are going to sit in there forever and you're never going to use those, but we're going to use the right ones that are going to help you the most. If they don't, hey, let's keep them out of there. Let's not get them out and deal with them. Let's keep them where they are. And if things change and we need them in the future, then fine, we'll start dealing with that tool a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dave, if you're ready, let's jump into it because my first question I have comes from Jeff. And Jeff says, when am I required to start taking required minimum distributions from my tax deferred accounts?
Jeff, the current age is age 72. So with the Secure Act that passed at the end of 2019, they moved that from 70 and a half to 72. Now, there is some discussion, not put into law yet, but one of the proposals that's out there by many people is to extend that to age 75. Now, just to give you some of my opinion here, this doesn't really help you answer your question, but I'm not a fan of that. And the reason being is about 42% of the people live off of these required minimum distributions. They have to have them. And obviously, that's the poorest segment of the population. So if we extend that period out, all we're doing is continuing to help the wealthier segment of America at the detriment of those who are having to take those distributions because they need the income to live.
And Dave, why would they extend that to 75? What's the reasoning you feel that's behind this?
They're trying to allow people to build up more assets. If you don't have to take it out, then you have an opportunity to build additional assets. But again, all it's helping is those who have enough other assets that they can allow this to happen. For the other person who's having to live off of it, but they've got a problem. In reality, even if you have to take it out, hey, put it in another bucket. If you don't need to spend it, you can put it in another bucket. You paid your tax and now allow it to grow from there.
I think it's very important that we make sure that we're allocating the right amounts in the right buckets, like you're talking about, and making sure we're doing it in a timely manner. I think that's a very key point you brought up.
And if people would do it the right way, the reality of it is these required minimum distributions are not going to play a big part in their retirement anyway, because we've moved to the buckets you talk about. So we have the maximum amount in that tax-free bucket, so we don't even have to worry about it.
I think as we're looking toward retirement, we just feel like, oh, we've got Social Security that's going to take care of us. Just like you're talking about with this particular situation, is we can't rely on one thing, and if we are, we're doing it wrong. We should have many other aspects into retirement instead of just looking at this one aspect to say, hey, this is going to ride me through this.
We really do. And it's one of the challenges that I faced throughout my career, because I found many times, I do a lot of tax work as well. I'm a tax planner and tax preparer from a CPA side, that many of the clients I've worked with there, their main asset is their business. So they've got this business that may be worth millions of dollars, and then they've got this pot of Social Security, and that for many of them is the retirement. Well, for some of them, it works out extremely well. They can sell that business, make a lot of money. But when you've got all of your money tied up into one bucket, there's an opportunity to have a higher risk of problems and to have everything completely collapse. And unfortunately, I am seeing people now. I've got a good friend that his business was worth millions of dollars a year or two ago. It was his main retirement asset. Now it's going into bankruptcy, and he's going to have a really bad retirement going forward, because it's going to cause him to lose a few other assets that he had personally that he was going to live off of during his retirement years.
And Dave, if we're looking at retirement, we have a business or we're looking to go into getting our own business, what advice do you have as we're kind of getting started? I know we're getting off track, but I want to get people some ideas as they're saying, hey, right now is a good time to start a business. Let's help, revive this economy a little bit.
Your highest chance of success is getting into something you know. Now, that's something that most business owners don't do, and that's why over 50% of businesses fail. And I'm not saying that you aren't one who got into a business and made it work even though you knew nothing about it. But when we look at statistics, if you're saying, I want the highest probability of succeeding, number one, you've got to find something that you know and understand, whether you've worked in a business before where you've learned the skills, or maybe you've got an education that's taught you the skills that you're going to need. And then you want to find a niche. You want to find an area that you don't have a lot of other competition, because that's going to allow you to expand out and grow. It's going to allow you to charge more for your products or services. So if you can do these two things, you've got a decent shot. If you try to just find a business online that you know nothing about, chances are you're going to really struggle once that business gets going. Because I will tell you, businesses work. It may appear that when you see a successful business that's been going for 10 or 20 years, you're like, oh, that's so easy. I can't believe it. Well, you didn't see those initial years when they were spending 80, 100, 120 hours a week trying to deal with all the headaches.
Exactly. That's definitely a hidden piece that most people don't realize. And it's hard to pay yourself when you're working. You can pay yourself your normal wages, but outside of that, trying to do 120 hours a week, it just doesn't work out.
The honeymoon ends very quickly. I will tell you, I've owned a number of businesses myself. I love being a business owner. I'm a fixer. That's the part I like about business, is trying to get them restructured. But it's a lot of work. There's no other way around it, as it's going to take you some time.
Exactly. Well, Dave, let's jump over to my next question. This one's from Karen. Should I do a Roth conversion if the conversion will put me in the 24% tax bracket?
I don't know all of your facts and circumstances, Karen, but for many people, the answer is yes. We've got some really big brackets right now. And when we look forward to 2026, if you're in the 22% bracket, some of that could jump into the 25. And from a 24% bracket perspective, you're going to jump into a 33% bracket for many people. So yes, it could be a great time, even if you've been in the 22 up to this point. That 2 extra% may be well worth it when you look at being able to get Social Security taxation off the table, when you look at other consequences that may come into your retirement. But I would want to know more information. We would need to better understand what your brackets look like once you get into retirement, where your asset structure is from the buckets that we talk about. But for many people, yes, please take advantage of 24% bracket. You have it.
Dave, when is a good time to do a Roth conversion?
Yesterday? Is that a good answer?
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for, but
Yeah, the sooner the better. The reality of it is a short window here where taxes are scheduled to go up, and things can change as we look to the future. But what I found is when we do this planning, and especially the guys I've worked with, like Dave McKnight, who's done it for a decade plus now, you don't have people coming back complaining that they eliminated these risks. Even if they get into retirement and their tax rates are the same, they're happy to know that that's been paid, that the money's there. I know even from a business planning standpoint, one of the things that I always try to do when people have S corporations is what we try to do is to include all the taxes they'll owe in their W-2 to make sure it's just paid. So whatever you get's yours. And that's the great thing about the planning we do is if you can know that when I get to retirement and I pull $100 out, that $100 is mine, or I earn $100, it's going to be mine, and I don't have to worry about what the percentage I'll give to someone else is. You're pretty happy with that from the experience we've had as we've dealt with people over the number of years.
and Dave, you mentioned risk. Tell me like 5 or 7 of these risks that you keep talking about that people need to be aware of as they're starting to look into retirement.
Two biggest risks are tax rate risks, that taxes are going to be higher in the future than they are today. The other one is longevity risk. We're living much longer than we have before. And the problem with longevity, the longer you live, the more you have problems with all the other risks that exist out there. Others that I would tell you to be very aware of: Social Security. Spend your time, figure out when you should take that. Too many people are claiming too early. It's putting havoc on the other assets in the retirement because they're having to pull down too quickly because they don't make enough off of their Social Security to cover their living costs. So that's one. Another one you really want to look at is sequence of return. We've got a market right now that's doing very well. It creates greed in many people where they think that it's going to continue on forever. Look back in history. Markets go up, markets go down. You need to prepare yourself for a period of time where we may have a down market. And the other one I just comment on here is long-term care. 70% of you will have an issue if you live beyond life expectancy with long-term care. You're going to have some type of event, very expensive. You want to do your part to eliminate that now, if you can, by putting in strategies that will allow you to take that risk off the table.
And Dave, how do we avoid these risks? I mean, you're talking about several risks here, but how do we avoid these as we're headed this
By
retirement
preparing
direction?
for them. Really, it is. It's just like when you look at it from any type of risk. If you've got a home that you bought, you have risks surrounding you regarding that home. Now, depending on where you live in, if you live in a floodplain, well, you definitely want to insure against floods. If you fires, fires for sure is something you're going to want to insure against. Other things that you may look at. So if we prepare for that, we put everything in place, we make sure we're doing the appropriate planning, you're going to be taken care of. You're going to have the tools in place to make sure you're covered, but it's going to require you to look at your retirement different. It's going to require you to take more time with your retirement. People don't like to spend a lot of time planning for retirement for whatever reason. I don't understand that because I love looking to the future and projecting out what the future might look like for me and my family. But we've got to spend more time doing the planning, put it in place, and then we can have the tools there to take these risks off the table.
Exactly. Well, Dave, my next question I have comes from Rebecca. What is the highest marginal tax rate we have ever had?
If you can believe this, Rebecca, and it is true, I'm not trying to lie to you here, 94%. Can you imagine? Now, that was during 1944, 1945, during World War II. and it was on any income above $200,000. Well, that's like $3.2 million today. So don't get scared that if you're in the middle class and you're saying, wait, I could go back to 94% on my money. That's not going to happen anytime soon. And in my opinion, ever, if you're in the middle class. But that was the highest bracket. There are a number of economists that say we need to go to about 88% if we really want to fix the problem. But for that highest segment of the population, they should be paying about 88% tax on every dollar they earn. So something we need to look at, but 94 is the highest.
Well, today we're getting a new president, and we've talked about many things that are changing. But talk about tax rate risk or tax rates as the new president comes in. Do you see much of that changing? Because we know when tax rates are going up, but do you see that even changing sooner?
Yes. Currently, for those who make over $400,000, those in the wealthiest segment of the population, it's only about 6% of the population, depending on what numbers you use. So, not a large segment of the population, but you've got some major changes for that group of people. You've also got major changes coming up if you've got large assets where you've got substantial amounts of gain built in. Talking about doubling the capital gains rate, going from 20% to 39.6%. Talking about removing basis issues with your assets when you die and transfer those assets. Talking about cutting the state exemption down to 3.5 million from over 11 million that we have now. So yes, we see a huge need for planning. Now, if you are in the middle to lower income segment of society, you're probably not going to see a whole lot of changes anytime soon. In fact, you're going to have to get lulled to sleep thinking, I don't need to worry about this. They're going to take all this money from the rich people. I'll just sit here and enjoy my life. Well, be aware there's not enough rich people. So once they get through with them and they realize that that money is nowhere near enough, what's their only other option? We've got to go down the ladder to
Mhm.
other individuals. And that's going to come at some point in the future, in my belief.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, Dave, let's jump over to my next one that comes from Carl. Can I apply for Medicare at age 66?
Yes, you can apply for Medicare and should at age 65, unless you've got some other type of employer provided or government provided health insurance. So you're going to want to do it at age 65. You'll do it about 3 months prior to your 65th birthday just to make sure that everything gets put into place. So you don't have gaps once you hit age 65, but you can do it then or anytime up until you pass away. Now, if you do wait and you don't have other coverage, there's going to be some consequences. Part of those will be additional fees you're going to have to pay. Part of that's going to be a period of time you're not going to be covered. So you do want to take that into consideration. But yes, go ahead. What you can't do though is if you claim Social Security at 62, there's no Medicare until 65. So be aware you'll have a 3-year gap there you're going to have to figure out.
And why would people not want to sign up? So let's say they're 65, or let's say they're in the 70. What's the reasoning why people wouldn't want to sign up when they can?
Couple of things that we see. Number one is if you're healthy and you've not really had a lot of medical issues, maybe you're in a position that you're saying, why do I really need this? I'll just pay for the out-of-pocket costs that I have to pay under my having no insurance. The other one is oftentimes they've got some other form of insurance. Now, again, if you've got employer provided insurance, may work out well for you. You can delay Medicare. But if you're on Obamacare, if you're on one of those plans, that's not going to work for allowing you to delay the Medicare penalties that are associated with it. But usually that's what we see. Someone's healthy or they've got some other coverage or they just don't understand the program. That's another one. And I can't stress how important that is, that when you get there, if you've got even other insurance, you really need to look at what's going to happen with your Medicare. Because if you're on a small employer plan, Medicare may be required, they may require Medicare to be your primary insurance. So you're thinking, oh, I'm insured. I've got this insurance. They'll take care of everything. And then all of a sudden you get all these bills and they're saying, wait, they didn't pay those. And they're saying, yeah, you were qualified for Medicare. You didn't have it. So therefore it's your responsibility, not ours. So please take the time if you're getting to that age to make sure you understand how it's going to work for you in your situation with any other insurance you may possibly have.
That's great advice. Well, Dave, we have one that was very similar to one last week, but from Lysandra. Do you use term insurance or permanent insurance to create life insurance retirement plans?
We really, if you look at it, you could say it's a combination of both, but it's because what permanent insurance is, if you look at it, is really term insurance with a cash value buildup. So what you're doing is you're buying a term insurance policy to make up for the difference between your death benefit and whatever cash value you have. But it's permanent because it's allowing you to build that cash value up so you can use that for tax-free distributions in the future or other spending needs that you have that you can get that tax-free growth and tax-free distribution. But the way those permanent policies are is you're going to have to buy a segment of term, which is why we want to use something that's very stable. We talk about that many times in our webinars, is you don't want that volatility, because if you get to age 80 and what should have been a small window, maybe $100,000 of term insurance, and now you're having to buy a $300,000 piece of term insurance, you can imagine the cost of that for an 80-year-old is going to be much, much higher than it would be if you set it up correctly.
And Dave, when we're talking about the life insurance retirement plans, do you see people out there buying them just for a short period of time? Because I find that pretty detrimental for their retirement. But do you ever see people, or do you see them sticking it out for the long haul?
Way too often. It's like if you're looking at it from a divorce perspective, it's my belief that divorce happens way too often, that it shouldn't happen as often as it does, that we should stick it through if we can and work through there. And I realize that everyone's got a different story and a different situation on why their marriage falls apart. And everyone has a different story and situation of why their insurance falls apart. But we want you to get that for the long term, because if you don't, for those that are, and I see it all the time, you're going to buy a bad product and it's going to not perform the way you want it to. And again, you may even have a good product, but if you get out of it in 5 years, what you've done is lost a lot of money. It's not performed the level it should have or provided you the safety and security that life insurance meant to do. So we do see it, unfortunately, but please, 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 if you're listening to this and you're expecting to buy permanent insurance for 4 or 5 years, don't do it. Not a good situation for you.
Yeah. Once again, great advice. Dave, Helen says, are there surrender charges with the life insurance retirement plan?
There are, and it really goes back to that last question, CR. The question of, are people buying them for a short period of time? Well, the problem is that most of the fees associated with these are incurred during the initial years. And there are surrender charges that can go out anywhere from 5 to 10 years, depending on how the policy's set up. But these fees are going to affect your cash balance. So if you've got a situation where you've been able to put $50,000 into one of these plans and then you liquidate it too quickly, you're not going to get $50,000 back out because of the surrender fees associated with it. Now, when you look at it for the long term, if the only way you're going to liquidate that sooner is you pass away, it was the greatest thing, because instead of getting your 50 grand back that you put into a regular investment plus the growth, maybe I got death benefit of $400,000. Well, but if then I let it grow, well, the cash value is going to grow. It's going to work the way that it should. I'll have the tax-free growth, tax-free distributions. But yeah, surrender charges are something you need to be aware of when you look at these policies, and why many times we want them to have short-term, as short a term as possible. Now, still maybe 5 or 7 years, but we want those contributions, CR, to go in as quickly as we can so that we don't have risks of uncertainty that create a collapse of these policies. Sometimes that can happen as well.
And Dave, why are you finding people pull out of these earlier than they should? I mean, do you see big issues that are coming in their lives that create that?
Yes. Well, yes. The two sides, 2 or 3 sides. Number one is you've got a situation where they were sold something that was never explained appropriately to them. So it's not performing anywhere near the level that the agent told them that it was going to perform. That happened to me. I tell my story of where I got a policy way back early in my career that was illustrated at 12%. You'd laugh now. Now, at the time, the market was doing well, but the market's doing well right now. Where I saw one of my statements the other day, I had a 40% return. Well, 40% return, 12 seems pretty manageable in there. The other one, though, is we've got ups and downs in businesses and life. So we'll see situations where people's policies will get extended out too far, and then they just can't keep up with it because of the ups and downs in life, or that someone sells them one where they don't really even have enough money to do it in the first place. We see that. And again, these agents who just want to look out for their own interest put a policy in that you can barely afford year one and probably definitely can't afford for the next 5 years. They get their commissions, and 3 or 4 years into it, you're like, I can't keep up with this. I've got to cancel this policy. Well, they won, and you ended up getting a little bit money back on what you originally put in. So fortunately, all kinds of issues that happen, but we also see a ton of situations where it's explained right, people understand it, and they can use it as a big part of protecting the retirement as a way for a asset protection strategy.
Yeah. And I find that really important, Dave, that as we're going through this, that people are getting that proper education. Like you said, there's 3 or 4 scenarios that can cause something like this to really change somebody's outlook. And if they don't catch that soon enough, they're going to be going through the same similar situations where they're going to be causing them to lose quite a bit. And I think what you're saying is making sure we're way ahead of the game and we're really planning this and not just going for the first person we talk to and taking that as gospel.
We really want to make sure that the money's available to fund that, even maybe in the beginning for certain people. Now, if you're in your 20s or 30s, these policies, I've bought a number of policies in my lifetime and have them that I did buy during that period of time, and they've been great for me, especially where I can't get insured now. I'm glad to have the policy and have them in place. But it is something that we've really got to look at from a cash flow standpoint to say, look, do I have the money available to be able to make sure this continues to get funded if things change? Because if not, again, we've got a risk that we're going to really turn something that was great, great, great for our retirement into something that's going to be something we'll regret, something we wish we wouldn't have done.
Exactly. Well, we do have Corey and Jeff, like always, jumping on saying hello. It's always great to have you guys here with us.
Hey guys, welcome. Good to see you, both of you out today, enjoying, I'm sure, that sunny Florida weather. Probably 70, 80 degrees today. You're probably trying to decide, do we go live with these guys or go to the beach today?
I wish that was my choices. I think you used to say it best, Dave, when you were living in Puerto Rico. I think you had 2 really hard choices. It was either the pool or the beach, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah, that was the hardest decision I had to make every day. Where was I going to go? Even on Christmas, was I going to go to the pool or the beach that day?
And Dave, we also have Gary that's from Facebook saying, what is your opinion of the top 3 states to retire in from an overall perspective?
Gary, I'm not sure. I haven't looked at this for a while. I know I did a webinar on this or a podcast back about 6 months ago, maybe. We talked about the 7 top states. When you look at it, so 2 of the top ones in there are Wyoming and Nevada. That's from an income tax perspective, but realize too, when you get into retirement, you've also got to look at how do they tax your retirement assets. Some states that may have high taxes will tax retirement assets differently. So yeah, I can't remember what that third state is. You have to go back to that podcast, but they are out there. They are listed each year. The organizations that calculate this information come back and list these states. I think it's easier said than done, meaning it's pretty good to look at on paper and say, oh, okay, yeah, I can move to Wyoming and save a lot of money. I don't see a lot of rental trucks heading to Wyoming right now with the plan to retire there. So I think we've got to look at too where we're coming from, what environment are we trying to get into. Florida obviously is one where we've got a lot of people going. They have no state tax, but sometimes they take into consideration cost of living. They also take into consideration sales and property taxes as well when they do their calculation. But that would be a great state as well. So yeah, you've got to look at it, but realize some of your best states are not getting a lot of people moving into them overnight once they retire.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that podcast. Is like you expressed that you break down so many of those states in there, and it was very fascinating to me because the ones you talked about really weren't the ones that everyone was flocking to. And it's again, you bring up Wyoming besides Devil's Tower and in Yellowstone. I don't know much more that's left besides very cold winters. But you're right. There is some great information in there. So I encourage you that are watching this is to go jump over and check out those podcasts because those will really give you a good breakdown. And like Dave says, they change. And so currently at the time, that was the best scenarios for each of those states.
The other things you've got to look at when you get into retirement too is family. That's a big driver for many people. When I talk to the thousands of people I talk to on an annual basis, that one of their top considerations is where their family lives. They got kids and grandkids. Other one are their friends. Many people have gotten very close to their social groups. I know for Jeff, his church is very important to him, and he's got to have a lot of friends there, and that's important. Well, things like that could affect where we move. If we've got a group of friends that we've known for years and are supportive, we may end up deciding to just pay those higher taxes. And really, my job to help you be able to live wherever you want to. I mean, we got to figure it out and say, okay, let's take those rates and let's allow you to have the retirement of your dreams. If it's in California, that's a high tax state, or if it's in Wyoming, where you're going to have no tax.
Exactly. Well, Dave, I'm going to throw one more question in here from Anne. What if you take your Social Security earlier than 70 and invest it? I thought this was a really good question to end with.
I get this question asked consistently when I do Social Security classes because one of the slides that I show is the break even analysis. If you were to take it age 62, if you were to take it age 67 now, which most of the slides we use are 66, which last year would have been the last year anyone would have had that as your retirement age. Now it's going up 2 months each year until he hits age 67. And then we look at age 70. Well, one of the questions people come back is they're saying, Dave, you showed that the break even on all of these is before average life expectancy. But what happens if I invest my money? Can't I just take the money out at age 62? I don't need it. And I just invest it myself instead of allowing the government to invest it. You can do that. Not telling you you can't, depending on your rates of returns that you calculate, you'll find that your break even may be a little later. But what I have found when I've done this is a couple of things. Number one, people don't save like they think they will. That money all of a sudden becomes a new pile of money. It's getting direct deposited into their bank every month. Before they know it, they start spending it down. And number two, people aren't as good at investing as they think they are. And what they find is that even though, again, like right now, we're saying, man, it's unbelievable. The market's doing great. Well, a year ago, CR, when the pandemic first hit, the market dropped 40%. Well, what happens if once you get to age 70, you've got to pull the money out and now that market's dropped down? You've got some issues. Social Security is not going to drop. Social Security is if you take a 62, you're getting about a 6% increase up until full retirement age per year. And if you wait until age 70 from full retirement age, you got an 8% increase. That's consistent. Hard to get those rates of returns consistently in any other investment. So you can do it, but again, be very careful, and you better be very dedicated to your investment strategies if you think it's going to turn out better for you to do it that way.
Exactly. And again, Dave, I want to thank you for being here, and those who are with us live, thank you for being here. Gary, for your question, and for those that are watching on replay, we really appreciate the support. Please continue to watch these live shows every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And if you haven't noticed, we also have a new LinkedIn show we go through and just do very similar, where we just go and answer a bunch of questions that come through various webinars that Dave teaches. And that's a really fun show. So check that out on LinkedIn. You'll see a new episode every week that shows up there. We just have so many new things coming, always changing. Again, we also have the webinars that you can catch through theprosperityguy.com. You can also listen to the podcast every week. We're in season 2 and we're up to episode 40, which is pretty awesome. So we've really been bringing a lot of education on all of these platforms, and we're just very grateful for all the support. And again, if you want to meet with Dave, there's a couple ways to do that, but just go to theprosperityguy.com. And you can fill out a strategic form there and see if we can get you to meet with Dave and go through the scenarios and see what we can do to help you plan as well. And Dave, thank you again for being here, for being part of this cold, blustery day for my area. Probably not as much for you, but it's been good.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for being able to ask the questions and give me the opportunity to share this information. Happy to be able to share the knowledge I have. I try very hard to keep up with everything that's going on in the retirement world, so I can be a great resource for those of you who are listening to get yourselves to a tax-free, risk-free retirement, one that's going to be safe and secure that you can enjoy and look forward to, which unfortunately for many people is not something they're doing right now, is looking forward to that time because of the uncertainties they have in their retirement.
Exactly. Well, thanks again, Dave. And for everyone else, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.